AI isn't going to replace human recruiters. What it will replace is poor hiring systems. I'm Mike Desjardins, and in this episode of the Mike Method, you're going to hear how Andrea Tjoeng-Davey spotted the real inflection point in talent acquisition, not when AI first entered recruiting, but when it became accessible to everyone. Andrea has spent her career at the intersection of people, product, and technology, starting inside recruitment operations, then helping build and scale one of the early e-recruitment platforms long before HR tech was a crowded category. Today, as CEO of Scout Talent Group, she leads a global SaaS business serving more than 120 clients across Australia, Canada, and the United States. She's guided the company through rapid growth, embedded AI deeply into recruitment workflows, and proven you can scale productivity without stripping the humanity out of hiring. In this conversation, we unpack what actually changes when AI stops being a tool on the side and starts becoming the software itself, how agentic AI is reshaping recruitment workflows, why human judgment still matters more than ever, what candidates get wrong by over-automating their applications, and how leaders should think about speed, fairness, and authenticity in a world where AI is screening AI. If you care about the future of work, hiring well, or leading through technological inflection points without losing your values, this one's for you. Let's dive in. Andrea, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you have such a deep experience in talent acquisition that there must have been this moment when AI popped up and you started to think about the fact that AI was going to infiltrate talent acquisition. And I'm guessing you probably had a thought of like, everything's different now. As of this moment, everything's going to be different. Like tell us your version of that.
Sure. For me, we had been playing with AI and experimenting with machine learning and AI in our product for a number of years. We were using IBM Watson and experimenting with being able to profile candidate profiles and get some personality profiling from them. That probably goes back to 10 years ago now. So AI wasn't necessarily new to me. But when ChatGPT hit the market and I realized how accessible it was going to be, how anyone, even if they weren't a software engineer, would be able to use the tool. And then we started very quickly to think about applications for HR and recruitment. That was the moment when I realized, okay, this has now reached a different level. This is going to be a game changer. We need to move quickly to support our clients in navigating a new world where this technology is going to fundamentally change HR and recruitment.
So I feel like talking about IBM Watson in an AI context is kind of like talking about Blockbuster video and VHS.
It feels that way.
In the context of that, because it does. It feels like that was so long ago when IBM Watson first came out. And back then it was all about like, who can win at Mahjong or at chess, right? That was the big thing. And then could it pass the Turing test? And so my curiosity, what I'm really curious about is when ChatGPT came out and because you'd already been thinking about AI for a while, but what about the ChatGPT launch? Like, what did you forecast when it came out and you said everything's going to be different? What did you think was going to happen in talent acquisition as a result of ChatGPT being a thing?
I feel as though it was about accessibility and it made AI accessible to anyone, even those without a technical background or an engineering background. That was the change. So generative AI all of a sudden meant that AI was accessible, it was easy to use, it could be used in day-to-day situations, and it could absolutely be used in recruiting and in HR and in people management. And we were really excited to get our hands on those large language models and start to play with how to bring them into recruiting workflows in a way that made sense for the day-to-day recruiter who is so good at what they do when it comes to sourcing and talking to candidates and working with hiring managers, but isn't necessarily someone who is an expert in the technological side of things. So I think that was why ChatGPT felt like a game changer for me and in the role that I have, because it was all about the accessibility.
And when you think about it being accessible, so it's ease of use for let's talk about the talent acquisition side first, and then I want to talk about the candidates. Like, what did you foresee was going to happen on the talent acquisition side? So we'll give this tool, it's available now to hiring managers. What did you foresee their use case would be?
In the early days, I think the use cases that we were predicting were pretty straightforward and simple. Using it for things like crafting job advertisements, using it for tailoring interview questions, using it to help even with the initial kind of summarizing or screening of a candidate. Of course, the challenge that we were able to help our clients overcome is it's one thing to be able to open up a browser and use ChatGPT and type a prompt, but our clients also have recruitment platforms, they have ATSs, they have recruitment CRM. So how do you actually bring that technology into your ATS? But yeah, when we were in those early days of ChatGPT, when people were starting to log in and have a play and the world was opening up in terms of imagination of how we could use the tool, those were some of the early use cases. And if I reflect back, I mean, that was only a few years ago, right? And things like agentic AI and AI agents, they were not on my radar. I'll be very honest. I hadn't predicted the way that it would evolve and how it would evolve so quickly. But these days, that is how it's evolved, and that's how people are using the AI on the recruiter or the hiring manager side. That's how I guess the next kind of like foray into how AI is going to change recruitment and hiring fundamentally. And then from the candidate side of things, we could see pretty early on that AI would be able to do a good job. Generative AI would be able to help a candidate to craft a cover letter or tailor their resume or prepare for an interview. Those were some of the early use cases we could see. And a few years on, that's still a lot of how candidates are using AI for applying for jobs and recruitment. And then, of course, with agentic, it also has an impact on the candidate side, doesn't it? So things have moved quickly over the last few years. And when that first kind of ChatGPT hit the market in those first few months, those were the use cases that we were imagining. And that seems like a long time ago now, even though it wasn't.
It's not that long. In AI years, yeah, it does feel like a long time ago.
Yeah, it's like dog years, right? Times are by 10 or 15.
It's funny, right? Because I remember back, like we jumped on ChatGPT as a company, like the day it was announced, I downloaded it. And like a week later, I brought my team together and I said, I'm going to show you each something you do in your job that can be done by AI. Yeah. And if you can figure out how to work with this, and it's even 80% of the way there, or it can edit your work, then it's no longer good use of your time and energy to do this thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe you should be talking to customers, doing all sorts of things that are different than what this can now do. But I think similarly, we're like, oh, it'll help us edit things. It'll enable us to do a draft of a thing. And that was kind of, that's so cool. That's going to be such a huge time savings. And integration into platforms, it just wasn't there. Like even today, like the integration that we see in the software that we use is mostly just ChatGPT querying and bringing you back a response, right? And that's sort of the rudimentary, kind of like, oh, finally it does that. Now I don't have to use ChatGPT separately from my word processor, right? Whether it's Pages or Word or Google Docs. It's like, oh, there's Gemini actually in there. So I can just work with Gemini on the document as opposed to working in ChatGPT and then cut and pasting it into Word or whatever. And then, so that's sort of like now it's inside there. But what we're starting to see, which is really, I think, fascinating, is now that there are agents and there is this ability to actually have the AI become the software, which it really hasn't been. Really, it was you're using ChatGPT or Gemini separately, and then you're cutting and pasting it. And now it's embedded in the product, but it just basically does the same thing. You just don't have to cut and paste. You can work on the document itself or whatever it is. And now I'm seeing with the various, whether it's HubSpot or Slack or Monday.com, like these various tools that we use in our business, I'm starting to see, oh, no, it's actually going to be part of the software. Like it will actually do things other than just simply querying. So now that we're in that place where we're kind of making that move to where the AI is becoming the software, as opposed to just simply querying the data and bringing you back an answer. How do you see that now starting to shift the talent acquisition experience?
Well, it's an interesting reflection on the last few years, Mike. And I think speaking from what I experienced, we moved pretty quickly in embedding the large language model that OpenAI offered into the platform. Yeah. Because we knew that it wasn't going to be practical for a recruiter or a hiring manager to be copying and pasting from window to window. And then, imagine like you're looking at 50 applications and you're trying to copy them across. And then not to mention that, as well as time consuming and impractical, there was also obviously security concerns because with and you're dealing with personal data, and you know there's privacy and there's security, which is at the top of our clients' minds in terms of something they prioritize. So very early on, as in within a few months of ChatGPT being launched to the public, we had actually embedded the large language model into a platform so that our clients could screen candidates and assess candidates and be supported by AI in that process, all in app. So that was a few years ago. And I think maybe it's relevant at this point to explain that our philosophy around AI when it comes to recruitment and hiring is that the AI can be used to support the human recruiter. It can be used to surface useful information. It can be used to bring that information to the front of someone's mind much faster than if they were having to, you know, open up multiple documents and read them and find that themselves. So it can support, but philosophically, we do not believe that AI should be there to make the hiring decision ultimately at the end of the day. I really want to continue to push products out to the market and support hiring managers and recruitment teams with AI that enables, but it doesn't actually replace the kind of human responsibility in choosing who's the right person for the team or the business at the end of the day. And so that's been our philosophy right from the beginning, and we've carried that through over the last few years. And then more recently, I guess with the development of agentic AI, what we're seeing is that it's similar in the sense that it is removing administrative work, it is completing some of the manual tasks that previously people in the team would have had to do. It's able to move fast and move through high volumes of data or applications or processes. And the difference is it's able to do that independently and to do it in the background and not require the prompts along the way to kind of say, first do this, complete it, okay, now do this. You're there kind of like chained to your computer telling the AI what you want. The agentic AI that I'm seeing in the market and that we're developing means that it's creating independence and freedom for the human team to be able to set them up, tell them the task that needs to be completed, then go and focus on the more human elements of recruitment and come back and reliably know that the agent has done a good job of whatever task or process has been requested of it. That's the way that we're seeing agentic AI kind of start to evolve within the recruitment space. I'm curious to know, you know, for your business, have you seen anything similar or different when it comes to the agents?
Yeah, I think what I found fascinating, so we were doing hires this past year and we had posted the roles on LinkedIn and Indeed. And one of the things that Indeed was able to do that we found fascinating was actually suggest candidates who hadn't applied. So it was going out on its own and actually sourcing candidates and saying, hey, these are candidates that haven't applied for the role, but based on their resume and their profile, they would actually be a potential fit. And one of the candidates that it suggested actually got down to the final four, which blew my mind because it turns out this person was 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from me. He had actually worked for somebody that I know incredibly well. And so I was able to make a quick call to do a reference check. And this person hadn't even heard of the job, but the agent was out there scraping. Well, it wasn't really even maybe it's an agent, I guess, was out there scraping, looking for applicants that hadn't applied. So I found that helpful. I think the ability to use, like we Fathom record every conversation we have in the company. So that enables us to have transcripts of them. And to be able to take the transcript and look for things that we need to ask on the next conversation. So review this and see what we didn't ask or where we should go deeper. And then to be able to compare the transcripts against the resume and then the transcripts against the other transcripts to help to give us an objective point of view. So what we did was we got together as a team and had a conversation and said where we thought the ranking was for the candidates, who we thought would be most successful in the role. That's what we're looking for. It's always what you're looking for, right? Like, who do we think is going to be a great addition to our culture? And who do we think is going to be able to be successful in that role? They win, we win. And so then we looked at what ChatGPT's determination was, and that helped us to do one more round of screening and have great questions to ask each candidate to go a little bit deeper, and also to try to level set the way we were asking the questions, and also remove some of the, like, there's this cognitive bias, right? Likes like. So if you're similar to a person, you're maybe going to find that you lean towards a candidate because you've got good rapport with them. Or your personality styles are different. But if you have a team full of personality styles that are all the same, then you're going to have giant blind spots in certain areas. And so I think it's helping to remove some of the unconscious bias that can occur in the interview process that leaks in the instant you get to talk to the candidate. Prior to that, it's kind of hard because you're just seeing words on a page, a resume, and maybe a LinkedIn profile. So that's been our experience over the last year.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. There's lots of ideas and shared experience that comes to mind as you're talking that through. I think one of them is, so I'm here in Vancouver this week, working from our Vancouver office, but you might be able to tell from my accent, I'm an Aussie, and I usually live in Brisbane, Australia. And there's a role that we're recruiting here in Vancouver for sales executives and BD executives, because we're expanding our team due to the new products that we're developing. And the thing is, I have network and I know a lot of people in Brisbane where I live, but in Vancouver not so much, right?
Right.
And so I came to Vancouver this week and I was using our AI technology, and I said, I'm looking for sales executives with X years of experience, with experience in business to business sales and recruitment and tech backgrounds. And I was able to say, find me some candidates. Now, I had a packed day yesterday. I was in back-to-back meetings. I come back at lunchtime and the Scout Talent AI has said, I found you 55 candidates who might suit what you're looking for. And these were people that weren't in my network and hadn't applied for a job with us. They're actually people who, for the most part, are employed and not necessarily on Indeed looking for jobs, Right. But it's surfacing these candidates, and I'm able to then use the technology to reach out to them to see if they'd be interested or open to a conversation. And I've booked 3 interviews for this week while I'm here. So a similar sort of experience to what you were describing with Indeed. And that was an agent that was able to do the work for me in the morning while I got on with other responsibilities. So it worked beautifully. And I love what you were saying about using AI to, evolve your interviews, deepen the interview conversation, and also protect against bias kind of creeping into the recruitment process. These days with our product, you're able to prompt to say, what are the non-obvious interview questions that I might ask this person? That's one of the most popular prompts that we can see our users asking, which is a big smile to my face because, it's unlocked, creativity and a new perspective and a new way of looking at things, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And I think we're still at this infancy stage where I was describing this to somebody the other day about how we're all so excited about what AI can do today, but it's kind of like being excited about the first iPhone and then looking at like a 17 Pro and saying like what this thing can do versus the first iPhone is like a complete game change. And so I feel like we're such early stages that this is so great that it does this. I'm excited to look back, 2 years from now and say, oh, wow, we thought this was a big deal. But, give time, energy, GPU, processing power, and just innovation in AI. And so many more things are going to be possible. I'm curious what your view is, being a candidate on the other side of this, where there's an ATS, the ATSs have always been scraping and trying to reduce the candidate pool from a very large candidate pool down to a smaller candidate pool, whether that was using machine learning or now AI. Now you're on the other side of that, and you're a person who is trying to get a job. And you're looking at the job boards, you're putting your application in, and then you're hoping that potentially you're going to get a call to get at least a phone interview so that you can show up in your best way possible and learn more about the company, share with them your background. But there's now an AI also looking at this and trying to make that match. And so I'm wondering, what advice do you have for candidates who are out there in the job world right now, trying to put their best foot forward? What tools do they have at their disposal that can help them do a better job of getting recognized by companies?
Great question. And it's something that we discuss and debate within my team regularly. We're very focused on the hiring managers and the recruiters, but equally candidate experience really matters. And without the candidates, there's no recruitment to be had. So it's important for sure. I think when it comes to candidates who are applying for jobs in today's AI influenced market, the first thing I'd say is that the rise of AI and all of the talk about AI, it definitely doesn't mean that candidates are powerless, but the rules are changing. And the way that you may have traditionally applied for a job or thought about the recruitment process is evolving. And it's important to keep up with the latest technology and how it's being used on the other side by the recruitment team so that you can put your best foot forward. Don't assume AI is the enemy. So most organizations, they are trying to streamline processes and manage volume and actually improve consistency in the recruitment process. But I'm not seeing organizations removing humans from hiring at the end of the day. So there is a human on the other side of that computer who is making a decision as to whether someone should be progressed to a phone interview or a face-to-face or offered a role. I think in terms of practical advice, applications that clearly show your experience and how it matches the role, and I'm going to say in plain language, those applications tend to perform better than either vague or overly creative or overly verbose application. Yeah. And I think that's a trap that we can fall into as a candidate. If we are using ChatGPT to prepare a cover letter or a resume or a CV or answers to online interview questions, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the models, they can use a lot of words, right? And then if you're copying and pasting that, when it's being received on the other end, it can sometimes feel inauthentic. It sometimes doesn't actually answer the question that the hiring manager or the recruiter is looking for an answer to. So use plain language. You can use AI to refine your application, but make sure that it's authentic to you. The other advice that I would have is on the authenticity. Hopefully it is going to get to a phone interview, right? Or a face-to-face interview. And you want what the person has read about you to match up with how you're actually presenting in the interview itself. So yeah, I would be a little careful with like over automation on the candidate side. And I think, an interesting thing we're seeing in the statistics in our platform, many organizations are now receiving 2 or 3 times more applications than they were, say 4 or 5 years ago. So it's the same role, it's being advertised in the same location, and they're receiving 3 times as many applications. Now, part of that could be the market contributing for sure, but part of it is being driven by the fact that candidates can use AI these days to apply so much faster. And I mean, a candidate can use an agent to send applications for them if they are technically minded. That's not like super accessible to everyone yet, but it will become more and more available. And so the point that I would make there in terms of advice for a candidate is volume is not necessarily going to get the outcome you want. So fewer, more thoughtful, more intentional applications is going to lead to better outcomes where your authentic self is able to shine through rather than dozens of lightly tailored kind of generic applications. And then maybe the only other thing that I would say is in a world where recruiters are receiving lots and lots of applications, finding ways to stand out. So, making an effort to send a personalized email or place a call or send an email through to that recruiter can actually have you jump out from a list of many, many applications that have potentially been AI generated.
I'm reflecting on one of the recent hires that we did and the sheer volume of candidates that replied and the process of trying to narrow that down. I will say that people that used some sort of AI to respond in sort of a somewhat generic with some little specific things slid in, it was really obvious. And from a hiring perspective, that was kind of a no-go for us because we would read the application or even the cover letter, and you could tell that this was it was crafted by an AI, and then we would look at the resume and the resume quality was not great. And so then then you think, okay, well, the resume is not that great. The answers seem like they've been generically drafted. So that's just like, okay, pass and move on to the next candidate. Where there were other candidates, as you say, that actually took the time and energy to answer them. And they did not sound like AI at all. It was like, this is a person sharing their personal experience around it. And they'd clearly gone to the website. They understand our business. They, their resume was really easy to follow. As you say, with resumes that are full of jargon or taking a simple task and making it sound like they've, designed the next Eiffel Tower. Yeah. And it's like, I know what that actually means. This is a flowery way of saying something very simple. We're also a hard pass because it's like, this is inflating. I'd rather somebody just be honest about their experience, because we're going to find out anyway in the interview process. We're going to ask very direct questions about exactly what they did. And if it's flowery, it's going to fall apart. And if they try to build up their capability beyond what they're actually capable of. So we just ask very specific questions about how they did it, what tools they used, what their process is. And if they talk future focus, they can use an agent, or they can use just a normal app, sorry, not an agent, just use ChatGPT to help them with future focus. When you ask them to describe what they did in the past, it all falls apart. So they've got a master plan for what they're going to do when they start here. But then when we ask about what they did in their prior roles, there's nothing there. And history tends to repeat itself. So if there hasn't been any significant learning, either on the job or between jobs, and they're probably going to do very similar things that they did in their last role. And so that's another tell that we found. It was like, okay, this person's not got the experience. They've used an AI so that they know what to say about what to do in the role, but they don't actually know how to do it. And when you dig deep enough, it's clear. So that was, So I think from a candidate perspective, everything you said, I was just reflecting on this recent hire back in September, August, September, everything you said matched what the experience was from going from 125 resumes down to 5 resumes, down to 12 resumes, down to 6 resumes that we did phone calls with, down to 4 that were interviewed almost 3 times each to finally pick the successful candidate. So I appreciate you sharing all of that, because it's exactly what we just went through, or very similar to what we went through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think many recruitment teams and hiring teams are experiencing the same thing. I think that, I'm not saying don't use AI as a candidate, because it can be a great tool that can help you put your best foot forward. But to build upon what you're saying, I think use AI for things like researching the employer, researching the organization, even researching the person who's going to be interviewing you. AI can be a great tool for those things these days. You can get to know a little bit about them and what their background is and the things that might be interesting to them. So use it for research. You can also use it for interview practice, which I think is becoming more and more popular. And you could use a prompt like, take on the persona of someone who's in recruitment at XYZ organization, and this is the role I've applied for, and let's do a practice interview. What questions do you think that they'll ask? That can be a great way to use AI. But I guess, you need to use it to build your knowledge, build your confidence, but not actually do the job for you of the thinking. Like, how will you apply yourself to this role? How will you succeed? How will to your point, your prior experience be relevant to take this role in this organization to a new and better place? So use it to support you, but not to do the thinking work for you, I think is important.
I think that's a great tip, to use it to support the practice interview. And if you're listening to this and you've played a little bit with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or any of Perplexity, any of them, and you're like, okay, but typing back and forth is not really going to feel the same way. What Andrea is actually referring to, I think, right? You're talking about using the voice mode.
Yeah.
Tell me about what that's like to use the voice mode of any of these products.
Yeah, it's been a game changer for me in my job. So I'll turn on voice mode, and it's almost like I have, depending on what I'm using it for, it's an assistant, or it's an advisor, or it's a best friend, or it's, it can take on any sort of personality. But there's a setting on whichever tool you use where you can switch to voice, and then you can just literally talk into your phone or your computer, give it the context, just like you would type a prompt. Be as specific as you can in terms of what you're looking to achieve, and then you can have a back and forth conversation. And the technology is amazing these days in terms of how quickly it can respond and understand what you need and really be a support. Do you use voice, Mike, in your day-to-day or in your business?
Constantly. Constantly. I mean, the instant it came out, I'm like, this is so much better than typing back and forth. So it depends. So in this example, how I would use it if I was a candidate in this example is I would take the job posting, I would take the website, and I would take anything I could find out about the hiring manager. And I would put all of that information, I would type or upload those documents. Then I would tell it, okay, now we're going to start a voice conversation. I want you to act as a recruiter hiring for this role. And I want you to ask me questions that you think a hiring manager would need to ask, or a talent acquisition specialist would need to ask to be able to properly determine whether or not I'm a fit. So let's do the practice interview. And then I'd love for you to give me feedback. Then once you've given me the feedback, then let's try it again. So I would give it those instructions, right? And then I would flip to voice mode. I might even have just voice moded that because that's quicker to do. And then if you haven't used it, it's, as Andrea says, it's just like having a conversation with a person. If you interrupt them, they'll pause and wait. It's very lifelike, and it'll work exactly as she's describing. So as a candidate, that's how I would use it. Day to day, how I use it is anytime I am moving and I have an idea and it's like, oh, it's too much to type, I'll just flip it into voice mode with my AirPods on, and I'll be walking down the street having a conversation with ChatGPT. I needed to create a very large manuscript and had an outline for it. And I thought, oh, it's going to take so much time. I used ChatGPT to help me to frame this. I'm like, I kind of needed to interview me. And I was sitting at the beach watching my daughter practice volleyball. And I'm like, oh, she's got a 2-hour practice. And I said, well, could you just interview me for this and then take my words and put them into a draft? And it said, sure. So over 6 weeks of volleyball practice twice a week at the beach, I just sat there and for like an hour each time until I got bored. I just talked to it and we had a conversation back and forth. And the wonderful thing was I could just sit down 3, 4, 5 days later and say, okay, let's pick up where we left off. And it has all the context, all the history. I don't have to explain what the conversation's about. It just keeps going. And it was able to then put out a draft in my own words with my own stories and narrative, which hugely sped up a process, which I had been delaying. I'm like, when am I going to have time to sit down in front of a computer and type all this out? And the answer was probably never. That's one example. We also use it internally for brainstorming.
Okay.
Or trying to have where there's either a decision to be made or something we're trying to create. And I can't really even type it out yet because I have all these fuzzy ideas that might feel disparate and disconnected. The wonderful thing about voice mode is it just doesn't care. You can just ramble. I just rambled to it. And
judgment.
No judgment. Yeah. I just ramble to it. It doesn't say that's a terrible idea. This isn't well framed out. It's just like, cool. Thank you. What I think you're trying to say is, or what I think the heart of the matter is, it'll even say from a first principles perspective, I think you're trying to solve for this. And I'm like, yes, great. Well, let's talk about that. And I just have this back and forth with it to clarify my thoughts. Whether it's meeting prep, whether it's presentation, but it doesn't really matter what it is. It's very good at doing that. So that's what I use it for. I'm curious, what's your use case day to day? As you said, you sometimes use it as an EA. What's your favorite use case right now that you find that it doesn't have to be in the candidate or recruiting world, but what do you find yourself most using it for?
Yeah. Okay. Well, can I tell you a secret?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not a secret anymore.
Love secrets.
So the one thing to know about me is that when I'm in Brisbane and I'm traveling to and from our global head office, I have a commute, I drive, and the commute is about 30 minutes each way. Okay. So I'm spending a bit of time in the car. And my phone obviously is connected to Bluetooth, so I can speak and it's safe and I can drive. And so I will often use voice when I'm driving. That's my time to use voice AI to, for both personal and professional.
Yeah.
Use cases. But I actually used AI to prepare for this conversation.
Oh, really? Okay. That's great.
I've spent the last week when I was still in Brisbane giving some context around the podcast and a little bit about you and the subjects that we were going to discuss. And I said, act as if you were a mic and let's do an interview.
I love that.
And I think the other interesting thing when it comes to voice AI, which is coming back to 3 or so years ago, what we would have imagined, my head was not in that space a few years ago, and how quickly the voice has developed and how effective the technology is. It's exciting, right? To think about what's going to come next. And lately I'm seeing a lot of recruitment teams start to use voice AI for initial screening. So conversations with candidates, rather than having the candidate have to prepare a written application or written answers to interview questions, actually giving candidates the option to have more of a verbal kind of interview in that initial stage before it gets to the point where a human is going to connect with the candidate. So on the topic of voice AI, I think it's important to remember that this is probably going to become pretty part and parcel of recruitment and hiring processes in the not too distant future. So if you can start to use it now, and become familiar with it and work out how to have it work in your favor, that's going to be a good thing.
I think that's great advice for candidates to just start using the voice mode, since that's where we're going with this, that they're going to be interviewed by an AI most likely on a voice chat. And the more fluid and comfortable they are with that, the less nervous they'll be the first time. Right? They can still be nervous and excited, but at least they'll feel better prepared, as I'm sure you felt after you used the AI to practice for this. I have to say, the output that you sent me, so Andrea sent me an email yesterday, which was so well crafted. And it said, well, here's the things that I have in my experience. Here's the things I know are going on in the space. Here are the things I like to talk about right now because I think they're important for people to know. And I read that, I'm like, wow, you were very well prepared for this conversation. It was great because it kind of gave me a window into how your thought process was working around both talent acquisition and the candidate side, and also strategically where you see the space going overall as a result of the influence and the integration of AI. And as a podcaster, I thought, okay, great. This gives me a number of interesting starting points for us in conversation. So just so you know, however you generated that piece that came out, whether it was from your conversation or however you use it, that was super helpful for me to receive. I loved it. It makes my job easier to know a launching off point.
That's great to hear. Thank you for the feedback. And yeah, I'm using AI all day, every day, it feels, and it's becoming more and more natural. And I think the more you practice, the better you get at prompting it so that it is authentic to you. And you work out when to use it, when not to use it. There are definitely some times when I don't want to use AI, but I'm glad to hear that it was helpful.
So now that you've got this business and AI is integrated into it since ChatGPT came out, you're already working with AI back to the Watson days. I'm curious, where do you see this space overall going? Like maybe forecast ahead for us if we keep going at this rate, the rate of application, both on the talent acquisition side, on the hiring side, and on the candidate side. Describe to me a day in the life of the person in the talent acquisition, and describe for me the day in the life of the candidate. I don't know, you pick the time frame, a year, 2 years, some time frame in the future where these things are really fully integrated into the experience. What is it going to be like for both sides of the coin?
Sure. I think I will focus on the next 1 to 2 years because it is such a fast moving and rapidly developing space. It's hard to know 5 years from now. That's a lifetime, right, in this world. So I think in the next 1 to 2 years, I'll start with the recruiter or the employer or the hiring manager side. My core thesis is that AI isn't going to replace human recruiters or human hiring managers in the recruitment process. I think what it will do is replace poor hiring systems. I think it's going to really improve recruitment, make it faster, make it more thorough, make it fairer. I really think it has the potential to do that. I think that hiring is going to become inherently hybrid. And by hybrid, I mean a mix of AI to handle scale and speed, and then humans to handle the things that are so important to factor into recruitment. And that's context and values and human judgment and, knowing the team that you're recruiting for and what is the culture and what do they need right now and applying all of that. That's very hard for a machine to do really well, but humans can do that really well. And then I think for people who are working in recruitment or who are hiring managers right now, I think recruitment will continue to shift from admin because let's be honest, like up until recently, a lot of recruitment has been very administrative and process driven and manual and repetitive. And I'm not taking anything away from people who work in that space. It's just been a requirement of the job to get the outcome at the end of the day. And so I think recruitment will continue to shift from admin to more strategic sort of functions, which is exciting. I haven't spoken to anyone who works in the space who doesn't love the idea of that. So, and I think talent acquisition leaders or people who work in recruitment or TA, I think that if you can understand people and you can understand AI, you're going to become extremely influential. So keep up those skills, keep experimenting, keep reading, keep up to date with the latest technology. And then from the candidate side of things, I mean, we've spoken about some practical tips for candidates when you are thinking about recruiting, or thinking about applying for jobs. And I would say the same. I would say continue to use the technology. Don't fear it. Don't disregard it. It's not going away. So use it and keep yourself informed, and make sure that you're informed as to how this technology can help you and serve you and help you put your best foot forward. I think that an interesting challenge that the market is facing at the moment is candidates are using AI to apply for jobs, and sometimes I think they're going too far, and AI is doing too much of the work right now, as we've spoken about. And then hiring teams are using AI to screen the applications in the first instance. And so you have an AI talking to an AI to make what is a pretty fundamental decision as to whether someone is going to be taken to the next stage of the process. No human has actually gotten involved at any stage of the life cycle. And, that's risky. And I think that's an example where we can take things too far. So coming back to, from a candidate's perspective, use it to support you, use it for your research, but still make sure it's authentic to you. And then from a recruiter perspective, use the tools to speed things up and surface information more effectively, but still make sure that you were involved in the decision at the end of the day. I think that's going to be important when we're thinking about future and the next 1 to 2 years. That's going to remain really important in ensuring excellent recruitment outcomes for both parties.
What I love about your vision of the future is there's also a piece around speed of hire, because, when you ask people when they're hiring for a role, when did you need this person? Like, how quickly do you need them to get started? The answer is usually like 3 months ago or 6 months ago. They're like, we finally got a job description. We're finally posting. And now it could take us 3 to 6 months to find the candidate we want. Right? So obviously if we can speed up that process with AI, that's better for us, right? Whether it's preparing the initial job description, getting out there, reducing the number of candidates down so that you've got a great pool to work with that could be successful in that role. And then from the candidate side, if you're wanting to make your career change and you're currently employed, or you currently are not employed and you're looking for your next career journey, the faster that we can get candidates to be on that journey to their next great role, the better for everyone. I hear it inherently in everything that you're describing, that it's going to become a more efficient process. And I think that helps everybody in the working world. Andrea, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today. It's been delightful to be in conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I have enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I was able to use AI to prepare, but this human to human conversation has been fantastic. So thank you so much.